Hello and welcome to another edition of Insight. I am Leron Brummel. Thanks for joining us. We're continuing the discussion as we started the series just a few nights ago. This is the third in that series. How do we secure our democracy given the events of March 2nd and the events afterwards leading to the swearing in of President Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali's government, which is which has assumed the reins of power and in government for exactly a month and counting as we go. We're heading into an emergency budget that is supposed to be presented. And how do we look at reopening the economy in the COVID-19 pandemic that's not only gripping us here in Ghana, but those around the world? Joining us, Professor Dr. Asquith Rose out of New York is joining us remotely as well. And Stephen Inval, no stranger to us, sport president of the Boxing Association. He's been all around the world traveling. We spent many a nights and many a days covering sports in our previous lives, covering sports all across this country and around. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us here on Insight.
Well, thank you very much, Leron. Let me say good evening to the persons listening in Guyana. And to those in the diaspora, I hope that each and every one is keeping safe with knowing that there's the COVID-19 hanging around that is disrupting our economy and disrupting our lives. I hope that each and every one is staying safe.
Dr. Rose, let me bring you in here. What about you?
Good evening to my fellow citizens in Guyana and in the diaspora. I'm very happy to be on this program, and I'm greatly appreciate that you have selected me to be in the program as well.
Very much. Doctor, since you're furthest away, let me start with you. You've had an outside look at events here in Ghana over the past 5+ months, specifically from March 2nd coming forward to now. What is your take on what would have transpired from then until now?
Well, first of all, I will say this. The problem lies deep in the structure of GCOM. GCOM has failed the people. We can also go on to say that the political parties as well. But GCOM has been brought in place since 1992. And I think GCOM has become a sacrosanct as an institution. It should have been modified, reformed ever since. So my take on this is that GCOM is the one that has led the people down. And for it to drag on so long through the court system and everything else, GCOM should have acted on day one when they saw those results coming out from Mr. Mingo's or whatever it is. The chairperson should have acted there and then. But what I will say for the future, I only hope that this government dismantles GCOM, reform the entire process. And you cannot put 3 PNC support commissioners there and 3 PEP commissioners. If you don't want any achievement or any accomplishment, then you can have those. But if you want to have accomplishment and achievements, then you have to reform GCOM. Put someone from the Bar Association, someone from the religious group, someone from the private sector, someone from the female group, etc., etc. GCOM must be reformed so that almost close to independent thinkers are a GCOM and not party affiliates. Because we saw clearly what happened at GCOM between the commissioners, back and forth. One supporting this party, we want them to support the process, the democratic process, and Guyana, not supporting parties. That is a failing concept. So that's my take on it so far.
All right. Dr. Rose coming out with that. Stephen Inval, what's your take on the events since then? And then, of course, we're going to follow up with what Dr. Rose just expressed to us, having different stakeholders as commissioners for GCOM.
Thanks again, Leron. Alluding to what the doctor would have said, I think GCOM is made up of personnel, and some of the personnel in the hierarchy of GCOM would have been guilty of several things. I think that the intellectual authors are the persons who we need to target for what would have happened over the last 5 months. You know, when election was announced, when it was announced that elections would have been in March 2nd, I could not have envisaged that going into July, we would not have had the result of our elections. As a matter of fact, you know, just yesterday I would have received a call from a colleague of mine in Qatar who was applauding because he just recently heard that, you know, that the elections have been finalized. And he was applauding that. But the main issue remains that there are people in GCOM who are bent on disrupting. And how do you fix that? How do you fix that? Clement Mingo did not work by himself. He did not get up in the morning and said, well, I will present these numbers that I think are right. He had someone guiding, instructing him. And that I think also the chief executive officer of GCOM did not work by himself, did not present these things by himself. He was following instructions, and we don't need to be the brightest person on the block to understand that that is what is going on. But that is what happened. And for me, to have this country go through 5 months of almost carnage, I want to call it, because it was the most difficult 5 months that this country has seen in recent time. And it is my belief and my personal belief that those responsible for that must be held accountable. Must be held accountable. And if those persons are found wanting, then they must have the full force of the law. We must do that because of the fact that people must be made examples. This country should never again in its life have to go through something like this. And again, I'm saying that those responsible, the intellectual authors too, must be held accountable. People must say, well, who I was taking instructions from. Because again, it is not Clement Mingo by himself. It is not Lowenfield by himself. There are other persons who are behind this. And I am just a patriotic Guyanese. This is not being on any side of the fence. This is being on the side of Guyana. And persons on both parts of the political divide have suffered immensely because of the last 5 months. And again, I do hope that justice is served at the doorstep on each and every person who is responsible for dragging this country through the last 5 months. That is my take, sir.
Steve, you alluded to having action taken. Dr. Rose wants a complete overhaul of GCOM. Dr. Rose, let's explore your scenario. How do you go about having independent persons on a commission for GCOM? Who nominates? How would you see a system like that working if we're talking about reforming GCOM?
I think the process should take place. Let Parliament nominate and appoint commissioners independent of the political parties. Let Parliament be the sole institution to do that. And then these individuals, the senior level of individuals there, will have to take an oath so that they are there to work in the best interest of the organization and the country, not for political parties. And no one should be appointed at GCOM that has a life appointment or cannot be removed from office. They should be held accountable for actions that are not appropriate or contrary to the rules and laws that govern the country. So I'm saying that GCOM must be restructured. Number two, we got to make sure that no region is left behind, like what happened in Region 4 was the last to be counted. The votes should be counted as the votes come in, recorded at each polling station. As GCOM get those numbers, they should recount the votes and announce it publicly over television. And having said that, what GCOM should do as well is to make sure that as they get the final results, they make their SOPs public outside of the two parties, because it is GCOM SOPs that actually counted. They should make their SOPs counted and said who won or who lost the election. And the chairperson, I don't believe that there should be any report from the CEO. What the CEO should be doing is allocating MPs or votes in his district. But the general count should be done publicly. The chairperson declare the winner, and then a report filed by the CEO to say, well, who got so many regional votes, who got so many national votes. But not you have the results and then you going back to ask the CEO to write a report. You have the results already, so you just write a report based on how the allocation of seats should be done. That's all the CEO should be done. And frankly speaking, I don't even think GCOM should have a CEO. GCOM should have a coordinator or somebody. These lofty positions, CEO and what have you, no. You need a chief elections officer, yes, but he should be the person to just give the allocation of seats, because you know the results. There should be no more report. The results came in. These are the results we have. Announce it, declare the winner, and then you get the allocation of seats after. That's my take on it. Pertaining to Mr. Mingo and these other folks, Mr. Lowenfield, who my colleague said were not acting by themselves, that may be true. But if you restructure GCOM, then there is no need for these people to be acted on anyone's behalf. No political party will be telling them what to do. As the votes come in, they're counted, the results are announced publicly. Like what's happening in the States, what's happening in Canada. So nobody can say, well, try to rig the system, for the lack of a better word, or use it for their party's advantage. GCOM is an independent institution, and GCOM must act as independent. Anyone who will take sides should be given the boot right away, fired on the spot. You don't need that in a government as we speak. It's 5 months, not only that Guyana has this and that, but creates a bad reputation of Guyana on the international scene. Stall the economic development, even though we have COVID, and put people out of work unnecessary. These are things will have consequences and long-term consequences. It has taken the country back. So my take is that this government cannot let 5 years go by and leave GCOM as it is. It has to dismantle that structure, thorough dismantling of that structure, and put a new structure in place. And I'll go as far as to say, when it comes to organization skills, I have that. I can help them put that in place. A structure that will be as independent as possible. I know there can be complete independence from anyone because someone is affiliated to one party or another, but you must take an oath and you must abide by your oath, or else the consequences will be grave.
Which is what we experienced over the last 5 months. Steve, let me bring you back in here. Do you agree with the line Dr. Rose is taking in terms of a complete overhaul of the Elections Commission?
Well, Leron, I'm not a legal mind and, by any chance. But what I think is that GCOM needs to be sanitized. There were several instances that peaked out during the course of the last 5 months that says that even if it is not a complete overhaul, we need to have serious overhauling of GCOM and how it works. I can say this without fear of being contradicted. What has been on show has more or less put a stamp as it relates to which part of GCOM needs urgent attention. I think we all know which part is that, and I can say that His Excellency and the PPPC party are going to make sure that by the time we get to the next election, we would not be having a revisit of this, of what has happened during the last 5 months. It is not easy for us as citizens of this country, Leron and Dr. Rose, to have to endure that sort of hardship. And I would be first and foremost in the line to say, yes, let's sanitize GCOM. How that is going to be done, I would not want to forward a case right now, but I am assured that is something that is a priority in the mind of the present government. And it's a priority because of the fact that we believe that democracy must be the order of the day. We do not want to head back to the days I was a teenager in the 80s. And I have been able to witness things that have happened during the course of election. I have a son who's 19, he's voted for the first time. And he has been able to witness things that I would have witnessed in the 80s. And that has left an indelible mark in his memory as to what elections is all about. This is his first election, and this is what he was served up. I'm saying that he would not forget that for a lifetime. And if he would not forget that, I will hope that this is the last time my country has to go through this. And whatever has to be done must be done to make sure that there is no recurrence of it. And I understand and I think and I know that we have the legal minds that will address these situations. And again, I can't overemphasize it. Those responsible for that must be held accountable through the legal process.
Steve, while you mentioned the legal process and those being responsible, as President Ali said in his inauguration speech at the beginning of August, an investigation will go through. Attorney General Anil Nandal has followed up. Just an interview I did with him a few days ago, has followed up saying this is something very big that we need to understand what is at play, what is at stake here. And we talk law, which means the next step we have to talk about is a constitutional reform, because there was the discussion of the abuse of the court system, not only the local, not only the High Court, the Magistrates Court, the Appeals Court, and the CCJ, but how do we now talk about constitutional reform in this whole scenario? Dr. Rose, let me bring you back in here.
Three, there have got to be a complete constitutional reform of the system or rewrite the entire constitution. And in that constitution, what I would like to see happen in Guyana? A fixed date for elections, like what's happening in the United States. A few countries have fixed dates for elections, but Guyana should now embark on a fixed date for elections. Number two, the British bequeathed to us in Guyana a proportional representation system, but they have constituency voting and first past the post. So we should go back to constituency voting process and first past the post. We cannot have a system that is not working. It is working, but it's working very, very ineffectively. Top up seats and all this? No. Let the people in each region, in each constituency, hold their MPs accountable. Right now, people don't even know who the MPs are. So MPs are being assigned to regions. No. And the other thing I would like to see, that MPs should be independent. There should not be a party list that you're telling an MP what to do. I understand the parties want to control their MPs, but that MP should think independently. If the MP acted out of place or whatever it is, you can pull the MP back from Parliament. But let that MP be accountable to his or her constituency. Now, Region 4, in my opinion, is too large a region. It has 40% of the votes cast in Guyana. Now, the person who designed this system had to be a brilliant person, because the person knew why they designed it like that. I think Region 4 should be broken up in at least 2 regions, perhaps 3. but two regions. I think the east coast of Demerara should have a region of itself, Georgia a region of itself, and the East Bank another region, because there are many other smaller regions than those two areas, the East Bank and the East Coast. So Region 4 should be broken up. It's too large. You cannot or should not have a region with 40% of the votes cast in the country. That is wrong. So I'm saying these are some adjustments that should be implemented in the Constitution reform. But if you can't just look at the Constitution and just touch it and let it go, no. You need a fixed date for elections, so everyone knows when this day is come forth. Unless there's a no confidence motion, you need constituency voting process. For as far as the polls, the person who get the most votes win the election. It's happening in every other country or most other countries. So we should not have a system where proportional representation, we got to go back and tabulate top up seats and all this, what they have down there. I don't understand. I said, that person put that together had to be a genius, but it should be simplified. I win in constituency number 1, I'm accountable to those people. But people don't know who their MPs are. So this is a complete fallacy of the democratic process, in my opinion.
Dr. Rose, you refer to a system I've lived in for a few years. That's Trinidad and Tobago. That does the exact same thing you're talking about. But in that parliament, you've got the MPs by themselves, and then you've got the Senate by itself. And then, of course, the same issue where we talk about, and then you have independent senators coming in. But the major parties in that fight, that electoral fight of the first past the post system and the constituency voting, it breaks it up easier, so you know by the end of the night, and then there is the concession that is supposed to come. That's an entirely different system that, yes, we could probably look to, but that has to be done, and you need the help to come in one time to start looking at that. Steve, let me bring you back in here. Dr. Rose is talking about reforming our constitution to look that way, that we have we have constituencies and persons voting for their MPs rather than being controlled by party lists, by the list that is put forward by the respective parties. Your take on that?
I didn't hear the last question. Leon, sorry.
Okay, so what I was explaining is that Dr. Rose is advocating for constituencies where persons vote for their members of parliament in the respective constituencies rather than what we have here, which is the proportional representation system. Your take on having such a system in Guyana?
Well, let me say this. I would be for any system that simplifies how we move forward when there is an election. But that does not take away from having people attempting to rig. We can have the most foolproof of systems, but that does not say that someone will not come up with an idea to rig. And if I should follow with what Dr. Rose is saying, he's trying to put forward a system that will make it harder in order for people to try to tamper with the system. But we will always have that. And my honest take on it is that we can try as much as possible as to minimize having persons tamper with the system. And, in the Bible, they said, out of evil cometh good. Out of what we have seen in the last 5 months, the running to, well, don't let me put it to the last 5 months alone. Let me put it since the no confidence motion. And we have seen that the abuse of the court systems, we have gone from court to court to court to court, where at one time it became laughable that taxpayers' money is being used and or being squandered, as a matter of fact, in order to get something that the ordinary layman on the road actually knows that will not bear fruit. But anyway, it still we still went ahead with that. When I'm saying we, I'm saying we as being part of Guyana, me being a Guyanese. We have gone from court to court since the no confidence motion, and then we have gone from court to court to court after the election. How do we put a system in place that will minimize such? Of course, the court is your resort. You have a right to go to the court, but you do not have a right to abuse the court. So, how do we put a system in place to minimize or to nullify things like that? I don't know if Dr. Rose is aiming at that when he speaks about reform, because again, honestly, the hardships that we went through since the no confidence motion, I won't wish it on any other country. As a matter of fact, Dr. Keith Rowley in Trinidad, you know how much we have now had. The Guyana has this stamp of being the leader as it relates to trying to twist and turn things. That when Kamla Bissessar had asked for a recount in certain regions of Trinidad, Dr. Rowley said, "Do not try to Guyana-ize this election." That is what we have become because of, I think, a few people who actually wanted their way. They were not able to get their way. The whole rigging process has been overturned, and my honest hope is that people will pay the price through the legal system for what they tried to do and were not successful in.
Steve Denval, I'll take that as your closing comments, but I'll also ask Dr. Rose at this stage to just clarify, as based on what Steve was asking, the system in which you're alluding to in terms of how we look at constitutional reform before we wrap it up.
Okay, great. In every country, there's something called good governance, and that depends on accountability, transparency, respect for the rule of law, and respect for the rights of the citizen. Now, when my colleagues spoke about there's no country that elections cannot be rigged, I agree. But you know the problem is? Guyana has a manual system of voting, not an automatic system of voting. So rigging can be minimized. And I believe that if the mechanisms are put in place, then rigging will be at a minimal amount. In every country, you'll have rigging, but that can be minimized because of the manual voting system we have in Guyana. Now, quickly, when we talk about constitutional reform, I just want to go back to that no confidence motion where the government was arguing you need 34 votes to pass the motion because the constitution says majority. It's about time when the constitution reformed in those cases, a number be placed. If it's a 65-member assembly, a majority vote of 33 should let a motion be passed or a motion be failed. 33, put numbers. Don't leave it open and let the court say, well, absolute majority. And a majority of 33 members sitting in that assembly and voted should either pass a motion or deny a motion. So they've got to put numbers to make it very, very clear for the average person to understand. So my thing is just like when the judges were arguing, the lawyers were arguing for the government side, that they need more valid votes. Valid votes are when you take a ballot box, you count the votes, you got rejected votes, you got spoiled ballots, then the rest that remain are valid votes. So why would a judge or judges in Guyana tell me that you need the recount should be based on valid vote counts, and then you have top officials from the government side saying GECA must take into consideration valid votes. If valid votes are not the ones that were rejected or the ones that were spoiled, the rest are valid votes. So we don't need, the country must be for, we don't need all these little arguments that lawyers will bring into play to say, no, if the constitution is justly reformed, you put numbers in place and you make it as simple as possible. Like the American Constitution, there are a lot of amendments, but people know what they can encroach upon. So you need a complete overhaul of the Constitution. And as I said to you, you put numbers where applicable to make sure that no one can put majority means absolute majority or minor, whatever it is. That's what we need in this society. And for Ghana to move forward, again, I will say, I will also give the PP party some blame for this 5-month delay because they were there for 23 years. The Carter Center gave them something in 1992, and they did not make any move to change that system called GCOM. It is not working. You cannot, it is poisonous to have 3 members of the PEP and 3 members of the PNC to decide on anything in GCOM. It's not going to work. The formula has to change. It is not going to work. So the PEP now has a chance to make those changes. But I will go back to what Aristotle said. A government that makes laws unto itself, those laws will come back to haunt them when in opposition. So the PP let those laws remain there. It haunted them when now they're in opposition. When they're in opposition, now they're back in government. Make laws that benefit the country, not parties. That's my take.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Ashquith Rhodes, joining us from New York, and of course Stephen Inval, former Member of Parliament, joining us. This has been another edition of Insight. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Best wishes going forward, and of course, keep safe given these COVID times that we are living in. Thanks for joining us.